Hello, this is Jed Brewer with Below the Line Club and Study Groups. I hope you're having a great day and enjoying the last few days, technically, of winter, I guess, before spring hits us here around March 21st. But really excited to have you on the phone today. We're going to be talking about opportunity knocks for C-stores, both in the cloud and on the ground. And I really view this as an infrastructure webinar. There's kind of two ways we can build our infrastructure to ultimately grow our businesses. One on the technology side, and so we're going to be talking some about the cloud and how it is enhanced and how we can adapt our businesses to take advantage of it to ultimately grow through technology. And then secondarily, just by growing our number of stores that we have, a lot of new to industry sites are taking place, and that begs the question of site selection. Where do we build? What process do we go through, et cetera? So we'll be spending some time talking about best practices around expanding your footprint and store network. So really excited to have some industry experts on the call with us today. Talking about the cloud side and the technology side is Todd Rosen, who's the Senior Vice President of CBE, and James Hervey, who's with Verifone. And talking about the ground side and site selection will be Dylan Gamboa. He's the Chief Revenue Officer of WEND Consulting. We'll talk more about Dylan a little bit later, but just from a high level for Dylan, he has 8 years of experience in the industry, 20 years in software selection and implementation. Actually graduated from Robert Morris University with a bachelor's in economics and American history. I'm an economist, so I appreciate the economics piece of Dylan. And he also has an MBA from Robert Morris, and gratefully, he's a U.S. Army veteran. So thank you for that, Dylan. And then Todd Rosen and James Hervey. Todd, he's a Senior Vice President at CBE. Just briefly about CBE, they provide the latest technologies to our industry in point-of-sale systems, video surveillance, alarms, audio, network infrastructure, and digital signage, and all of the above. So really understand how things handshake together between hardware and software. And so pleased to have Todd, you, and James on as well. So just a little bit of heads up as we get going. We want this to be as educational as possible. So we want to get your questions answered. So I have you muted, but please, if you have questions, type them into the dialog box there in the GoToWebinar framework. I'll be able to read those questions and I'll relay them to Todd, James, or Dylan, whoever the appropriate person is at the appropriate time, because our goal is to get your questions answered. Also, I'm going to record this webinar, and we'll put the recording available along with the PowerPoint slides on our website and send that all out to you either later today or tomorrow, so you can have those, share it with a friend, etc. So with that brief introduction, Todd, let me turn it over to you so you can share just a little bit more about James Hervey before we get going.
Thank you, Jed. I appreciate it. Good afternoon, everybody. As Jed said, I am the Senior Vice President of CBE. We have brought technology solutions and field service to the convenience store industry since 1974, and I'm proud to say that our growth has enabled us to really have a national footprint. For today, I'm really excited to have the opportunity to introduce our guest speaker, James Hervey. I have personally worked with James for the past 20 years, and James is a member of the Connexus Technology Committee, and he serves in various not-for-profit positions as well. He has worked in the convenience store industry since 2001, working for the National Association of Convenience Stores for 7 years, and then working for NCR, formerly Radiant Systems, for almost 6 years. And then for the past 11 plus years, he's worked for Verifone as the Director of Product Management in petroleum. So James today is going to walk us through what the impact of cloud computing means to you, your stores, and most importantly, your customers. One final note, James does speak fluent German, but I believe he plans on making this presentation in English. I haven't double checked with him. So I'm certainly hoping that's the case. And I'm grateful for his presence among us today. And I'd like to welcome James Hervey from Verifone.
Hey, thanks, Todd. And yes, Alf English, I promise. So great to be here with everyone. Quite impressed with the operation here. I actually have had a relationship with study groups for quite a long time, going back to my time at NACS when Dr. David Nelson was part of our smaller operator committee at NACS. So it's been quite something to watch the organization grow, and really a great opportunity to speak with everyone today. As Todd mentioned, I've been at Verifone for a little over 10 years now, serving as the Director of Product Management for our petroleum and convenience retail solutions. My entire career is in this business. I ran convenience stores way back when for Minute Mart food stores in Kentucky, country cupboard food stores outside of Atlanta before jumping over to the other side and working for NACS for a bit, and then working both at Radiant Systems and then at Verifone. And what I wanted to do today was just provide a high-level overview of cloud computing and how we see it impacting the convenience store. And you're going to see some sort of futuristic things. Some of these things are coming sooner rather than later. But the goal is just to get you thinking and to make sure that you're having conversations with your technology partners about what their cloud strategy looks like and what their cloud roadmap looks like. You know, when we talk about cloud computing, we really do see this as a sea change in technology, right? So this is just an example. This is back a few years ago when the BDO Technology Outlook survey asked CTOs what they expected among several large trends to have the most measurable impact on their business. And you can see, I mean, you know, they obviously a lot of people thought about Internet of Things, but cloud computing was overwhelmingly the top thing that CTOs thought were going to impact their business. And interestingly, really Internet of Things, if you think of Internet of Things, you're talking about essentially smaller devices, things, quote unquote, like thermostats and others, really connecting to the cloud and sending data to the cloud. So I would even argue that, you know, Internet of Things isn't even a possibility without cloud computing. So you're really looking at an overwhelming, you know, 2/3 plus of the respondents to this survey who really thought that cloud was going to have a measurable impact on their business. And that's borne out as well if you look at technology spend. So, you know, this is worldwide spending on public cloud computing. So this is just worldwide spending in billions on public cloud. So that's Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, Google Web. You'll see that from 2015 to 2020, that grew from 67 billion to 1.6 trillion. So the amount of spend that's going into public cloud is growing at a compound rate every year. And when we see the trends for the future moving past 2020, that spend is getting even more, right? So you're really seeing this year-over-year compound growth rate in cloud computing. I think it's 3%, 3% from 15 to 20 at a compound. So the average IT spend was 3% year over year from this time period. Average compound growth rate in cloud computing, 19% over this time. So lots more of the technology investment is moving into cloud. And, you know, people are seeing a measurable impact on business. They're seeing it both in increased in improvement in time to market, improvement in company growth, process efficiency. It's also bringing down operational costs, reducing IT spending, and allowing for a reduction in IT maintenance costs. And that's because when you move to public cloud, you're having this opportunity now to sort of let the infrastructure people manage your infrastructure for you instead of having to do it yourself. You're also seeing, you know, when applications are deployed in the cloud, it's just faster to get them deployed. So people are seeing real business impact from migration to cloud computing. And where we're seeing this interestingly in retail is we're starting to see some very interesting some interesting impacts in retail. So let's take for a second scan and go, right? So we're all familiar with mobile payment. We're all familiar with ordering things from a phone. This is an example of a Sam's Club in Arkansas. The point being here that the way cloud opens up these sort of systems is that in order for a phone and a gas pump and a POS and an inventory management system to all connect, they have to talk to each other at the cloud level. You can't have like consumer devices talking directly to your store network. So it's got to go to the cloud, and your stores have to be connected to other systems' clouds in order for them to talk with each other. So the cloud enablement of the point of sale and the store systems are really what start to make some of these scan and go type apps work. Here's a great example I love. That's basically a Roomba as a waiter, right? So, this is a restaurant. You can see the masks there. This is during the pandemic. And this restaurant is leveraging robotics to minimize human contact. So these customers are ordering their food on their phones. They're scanning a QR code with the menu. That's going to the kitchen. It's being produced. And then a robot is essentially bringing that food out there. Now, all of this requires massive cloud resources, right? You have to have the customers have to be connected to an ordering cloud. That cloud has to be up to date with what's in stock at the store. It has to communicate those orders to the kitchen. The kitchen has to know what to do with them. And then the robot's got to get there, right? And the robot is getting there based on communicating information back and forth to the cloud. I don't know how many of you have a Roomba, but you can't run your Roomba when it's not connected to the cloud. It's just not enough computing power on that device to store all the maps, to make all the artificial intelligence decisions it needs to. So everything in this ecosystem, from the ordering to the prep to the payment to the actual delivery of the food, is all being driven by cloud computing resources. This is a good example of another multi-system communication, right? So this is Chipotle Rewards. That's a Venmo app there. And right there, you see that Chipotle is essentially paying that reward into someone's Venmo app, right? So this is another example of how systems have to be connected at the cloud level. And what that really means is that not only do you have to have the cloud resources, but there have to be the appropriate ways for those cloud systems to talk to each other. We're seeing, skyrocketing of e-commerce, right? Grocery e-commerce has gone through the roof during the pandemic, right? And this is another great example of where, you have to have these cloud systems that are talking to each other, right? And that's not just a website where you can order things. It's got to go to the website. It's got to be in sync with the stock level in the store. It's got to communicate with the systems that the pickers used inside the store. The customer's got to be able to communicate when they're there. That's got to trigger an alert for someone to bring the food out to the car. Like, all of those systems would be unimaginable in a legacy point of sale environment or in a legacy store environment. They all really require this connectivity from cloud to cloud. And we're really just seeing this era of consumer-driven and dictated market when it comes to technology, right? Technology has to complement customer journeys, and we're really seeing, that driving cashless society. We're seeing data analytics. So now that you can get all this data into the cloud, you have this opportunity to run analytical analysis against it. But you have to have the right connectivity to do that. And finally, I'll just say, that mobile shoppers are everyone now, even inside of brick and mortar stores, right? 64% of surveyed mobile consumers visit stores weekly. 17% visit stores daily, and customers are expecting to be able to do things on their phone, on their mobile device, as they're interacting with retailers. So, Todd mentioned that I do work with Connexus. Connexus is the industry standards body that does that works for the petroleum and convenience retail industry. I have an opportunity to chair their point of sale back office integration committee, and I sit on the board of advisors. And one of the things I'm really proud of with Connexus is that Connexus is really doing a lot of work now in their API project to really get us to a point where we're ready as an industry to take advantage of this massive explosion in cloud computing resources. So Let's just start with this vision here, right? This vision of sort of what is unified commerce, right? And if you think about, what is unified commerce, you really see this idea that you have all of these systems, store level and above store level, that are all connected, that are talking to each other, right? Shipping integration, warehouse integration, payment processing, all the stuff happening in the store, pricing, order management, CRM. It's a lot, right? There's all this stuff, and all of it is coming into this sort of master data management warehouse. And what does that really look like for the convenience store, right? How do we rewire our business to get there? And that's the sort of thing that Connexus has been doing as part of their API work. So if we just start looking at the system today, right, this is essentially what we have today, right? We've got a forecourt, we've got payments, we've got a POS, there's a back office and a headquarters system, right? And those have some legacy interfaces between them that allow them to talk to each other. And then that data gets up to the headquarters through the back office, and then you as a merchant do whatever you need to do with that data. Well, what you really want to do is you want to build this sort of central nervous system in memory, right? That's what the cloud really brings, is this opportunity to have this lower cost ability to expand processing power, to expand memory, to expand the ability to really bring information in and churn it. So how do we connect to this legacy bit at the bottom into this central nervous system? Well, one of the things that we're doing at Connexus is we're really looking at building APIs that allow for our legacy data exchange to come into this sort of central nervous system or central cloud. And that is taking, the work that Connexus has done for the last 2 decades and reformatting it into a web services model, so that all of that data that's currently being generated by the point of sale system, by the back office, by the headquarters systems, it can get up to a cloud system in a standard way using APIs, using web services. And then once you have that there, now you're really able to start bringing in new innovation, right? So if you wanted to connect a delivery service, right, if that delivery service structures their APIs in an appropriate way, they can come into this central nervous system and then leverage those legacy APIs. So you can place an order on a phone, for example, and the legacy system can leverage the delivery services APIs to get that order and bring it down to the site using those structured legacy data APIs. Start putting partner data exchange, right? So if you wanted to exchange your data with sales associates, suppliers, your customers, right, you'd have the ability to do that through new partner data exchange API. So if you want a customer to be able to see all of their spend at your store, right, you can build a mobile app, or someone can build a mobile app for you that would pull their information out of that central nervous system that's running in the public cloud with an API key, but only bring that information that you want, and that information would be up to date because it's coming up from the store via those legacy data exchange APIs. You could start putting new structured data into the central nervous system, whether that's information coming from an Internet of Things device, consumer data feeds, the weather, the news, whatever that might be, it can come into the central nervous system and be shared with the store systems via those APIs. And then finally, if you wanted to start running machine learning or predictive analysis against that data, now you have these analytics APIs to do it. So the whole point to this is you sort of build out the cloud infrastructure, and then if you have APIs that can connect to that, all of a sudden you can start swapping things in and out without necessarily having to worry about the technical debt of the legacy APIs. So this is very, very powerful vision. Connexus's role in it is to help facilitate the development of these APIs and to facilitate the framework under which these APIs are deployed, not necessarily to build the cloud, but really to build the framework by which partners can build APIs. So when we look at how that comes together in a product vision for us as a technology provider, we really look at it in 3 ways, right? We're trying to build a unified cloud payment engine. So one of the things we want to do as a payments provider is we want to build a cloud payment engine that can connect our merchants to alternative payment methods, to e-commerce, to their current standard processors, et cetera, right? And we do that by essentially building a cloud payment platform. So that's piece number one for us. That's something that we're building as a company around the world. It's active and in place now. We want to deploy this in petro and convenience in a way that honors existing relationships, but allows for the expansion of things like taking Venmo or PayPal or other APMs at your store without necessarily having to wait for a processor to be ready with that technology. It also looks like a unified cloud site management engine. So this may look a lot like that last API slide I showed you, and that's because it's the same concept, right? We build a data repository for our customers. We use APIs to bring information about the store up into the cloud, and then there's an opportunity to then run microservices against that information, whether that's POS configuration, whether that's viewing the T-log, whether that's doing cart table management for the electronic payment server, whether that's connecting to back offices. All of those microservices can then run in the cloud against that data, and then third parties that need access to it can come through an API gateway, and properly authenticated, they can access that data without ever having to directly hit the cardholder data environment or the store. And then finally, it looks like for us a unified cloud transaction engine. So that is really the ability to actually run sales in the cloud. Now, you've probably heard a lot about edge computing. Edge computing is this idea of computing resources at the edge, at the site, that then leverage the cloud. So we think this is a good model for C-store. We don't know that the latency and the bandwidth of communication to a store and the amount of things at a store that need to talk to each other, it makes sense to round trip everything at the store to a cloud. But what it does make sense to do is to replicate what's happening with the store into the cloud. And then as you look at, communicating with roving cashiering devices or food trucks or things like that, then you can share a price book across those elements. You can share a transaction log. You can share a loyalty engine. So this is a future vision for us of sort of, taking the three things that we do, payments, site management, and transaction management, and putting them in a cloud framework, but in a cloud framework in a way that makes sense for the convenience store environment. So we see the cloud having a major impact on technology over the next 3 to 5 years in these areas. And while, they're not necessarily there today, I think it's important.
Guys, can you still
Yeah, sorry, I'm back.
Okay, good.
Yeah, nope. I hope I didn't cut off too bad. I think my headset died. So, anyway, I'm back on my handset. So, what I was saying is, I think it makes a lot of sense as retailers and as a technology provider for us to be having a conversation about what are we going to do with these resources, and also as an industry to be saying, what standards, what web services, what APIs do we need to make this happen? So a couple of ways you can get involved with that. I mean, the first thing I would highlight is talk to your technology providers, whether that's us and CBE or whether that's another provider. Be having that conversation now about what is your cloud strategy? What are you trying to accomplish as a retailer? What are they trying to do as a technology provider, and make sure those roadmaps sit together. And then the other thing I would say is, get involved at the industry level. So if you're interested in that, reach out to Connexus, reach out to NACS, and get involved at an industry level to help define some of these things. I'll just say, if you'd like more information on Verifone solutions, the presentation today is being brought to you by CBE. CBE is a great partner of ours. You can reach out to Todd. There's Todd's information. And if you have questions for me, Todd can certainly get a hold of me. So I hope that was helpful. And I know that Dylan's got a lot to contribute as well today. So I will end it there. And if there are any questions or comments, I'm happy to field them. But yeah, I'll send it back to you, Jed.
Yeah, thank you, James. A couple of questions.
Sure.
You talked about some of the trends you see coming down the future, the payment, site management, transactions management.
Sure.
What do you think are the biggest opportunities as it relates to the cloud that most of us aren't doing today?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So, here's something I would be thinking about, right? I would be thinking about the fact that we have, as an industry, we have a natural customer base in the delivery services that are exploding right now, right? So if you think about rideshare, if you think about grocery delivery, food delivery, right? It's putting cars on the road, and it's putting cars on the road that are natural consumers of for our industry, right? They need fuel, they need food on the go, they need snacks, right? And I think one of the things that we have an opportunity to do is to work with those services to find ways to incent their labor pool, their staff, their drivers to visit our stores more, and to do that through those apps. And I think, that's one thing that we really need the right data exchange models in order to be able to do, so that those providers can easily hook into our systems, right? The other thing I would say is our stores are generating a ton of data, right? And I know we all know that that's sales data, but it's not just sales data, right? It's transaction volume, but it's also information coming out of sensors and other devices at the store. And we're not today, as an industry, very robust at analyzing that data and making decisions against it, mainly because if you come back to that slide I had about the APIs, it's very challenging right now to get all of that data into one system, and then in a way that a data analytics engine can grab that data and run real deep machine learning analytics against it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then another thing you talked about was getting involved at the industry level, also talking with some key suppliers. Where does somebody start, beyond that, or like who are the suppliers I should be talking to about these issues?
Yeah, no. It's a really good question. So I would say a couple of things. I'd say there's a couple of suppliers that every convenience store operator out there most likely has, right? The first is your point of sale provider, right? So that would be us or one of the other point of sale providers. They have a huge role to play in this cloud world, right? So that's someone I would be reaching out to your salesperson or your account manager at your point of sale company and saying, I want to sit down and talk with you about the cloud roadmap. What are you planning to do in the cloud? How are you planning to support us, et cetera? Most all of us have a back office vendor, right? So that's another great place to start because they have a huge role to play in this. If you're running an ERP, if you're running a headquarters system or an ERP, that vendor is a good one. And then the final thing I'll put the plug in for is Connexus, right? So Connexus tries very hard to be a retailer-driven organization, right? Now, we as suppliers see a lot of benefit because it helps us take cost out of the system, but we really want to make sure that retailers are driving the roadmap, right? Because we can guess at what retailers are going to need, and we do a pretty good job, but ultimately we want to hear it from the retailers. So, Linda Toth, Gray Taylor at Connexus, that's connexus.org. That's a great place to start as well. And they have phenomenal educational content around these different topics.
Yeah. So that makes sense. Your POS provider, your back office provider, and Connexus are key people to sit down and talk to. And
Absolutely.
Like you said, what is your cloud roadmap that you're seeing, and how is it going to benefit me or impact me?
Absolutely.
Are there any last comment here, but any last specific things that people should be doing in addition to being involved in the industry, having those conversations?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, right? And what I would say is that if you are an IT manager, right, or you're a chain owner or chain chief executive, and you've got an IT staff underneath you, be investing now in education for your IT staff, right? So be investing in books, conferences, educational content around cloud computing, right? What is it? What does it mean? What is the terminology that drives cloud? There are terms like platform as a service, software as a service, infrastructure as a service, right? What's the difference between a public cloud and a private cloud? Like, these are the sort of in poker terms, the jacks are better that you need to play the game. So be investing in making sure that your IT staff is up to date on what's going on with cloud computing, so that when you're ready to invest or you're ready to make decisions, you've got a team that knows what they're talking about.
Makes sense, James. Yeah, I just view the retail network going forward. It's all about technology. How do we make ourselves more efficient? How do we better reach our customer and
For
serve
sure.
them? And the cloud is the way to do that. So really appreciate all that insight, and thank you for your time. And
absolutely.
Let's transition to Dylan now. Dylan, I know you're going to talk about site selection. Dylan Gamboa at WEND Consulting. But WEND Consulting and Dylan, I also know, in addition to what you're going to talk about of site selection, you also do a lot on the technology framework as well. Any input off of what we just heard James share?
Yeah, no, definitely. It is where we spend a good majority of our time talking with our clients out there in a very kind of agnostic approach of what technology do you need inside of your ecosystem. It's where things are going. It's what people are wanting and desiring. We are in that go fashion right now with phones, tablets, all of that. So what current technology, what future technology can kind of help lend to making you the most efficient out there. The big thing that we kind of prop our group and over here is, it's people, process, and tools. Technology is one of those tools, and without having those things honed in with the people, the process, and the tools, you're not really operating as efficient as you want from there. So that would be my kind of 2 cents on the back end. But I absolutely enjoyed the content there because it does resonate at home here with what we like to do and what we like to help our clients with.
Thanks, Dylan. Well, tell us a little bit about site selection best practices.
Yeah. So one of the things that we get a lot of questions out there is how can I streamline my operations, my process, but a lot recently has been around my organic growth inside of C-stores, bulk plants, card locks, and so our team, we got together and we kind of put together our 5-phased approach to really go from dirt all the way over to that ribbon cutting from there. So how do we define that? Our site selection process starts simply with the discovery. This is where we're going to gather all the information and kind of build that fact sheet of what we're trying to do, what we're trying to accomplish, and how we're trying to get that accomplished across the board. Establish some of those potential sites that we have out there. Work through the negotiations, get into that execution of sale, and in that phase 4, I always want to point out it is the most important, and you'll see that as we go through this, because this final requirements gathering and the construction negotiations can really make or break that site for you. And then finally, in that last phase, that construction management, that's when we actually get happy. We actually look at all the work that we've done, and we get to actually see that vision that we have come to fruition and get that open date and start increasing, sales in gallons and our buying power all the way across the board. So where do we start, and what is the right time to do this? So when you want to start in the site selection process, you got to understand your growth plans. What are your growth goals? If you're really looking at we're trying to do this quick, then we want to get sites that we can raise up and get to construction relatively quick. If our growth plans is to be organic and we want to work through individual sites or multiple sites, we just want to understand what are our growth plans for our company, and we also want to know what we do best. If we are predominantly card lock, if we're predominantly a C-store, we're predominantly truck stops, know what we do best, because we can expand upon that, because it makes for a simpler transition when that new site is up and ready to go. Right time. you know, we want to make sure that we do this at the right time. You don't want to start putting up a site too early if you're expecting, you know, traffic plans or development growth out there, because that leads to other factors that, you know, may not come to fruition. So we want to make sure that we're pinpointing that right time out there. So that can be, you know, there's no sites available, whether it's on a corner, whether it's off of a interstate stop. We want to make sure that that we see if there's any type of open gaps in areas out there. If we're looking to do any type of re-imaging for a company or rebranding efforts out there, that's a great time to start looking for those new sites. And on top of that, you know, there's always that thought of, you know, how do we redesign? How do we take what we have today, redesign it to make it more efficient for the current times? One of the things that we're seeing out there a lot is a lot of sites that are being selected have more parking spots available for things like curbside pickup or extra land on the backside for drive-through for people there, because we're looking for quicker and convenient things out there, especially over the last year with the coronavirus. So inside the phase one of that discovery, we want to start jotting down and really start putting together our initial thoughts. You know, this is where we're talking about budget discussions. We're talking about, do we want to be freeway? Do we want to be in town? Does it matter? Are we looking for both? Do we want to have a truck stop, a single site? Are we looking for multiple parcels of land that we can build 2, 3, 4 stores out there? We want to look at internally at our current C-stores and fuel sites, because that's going to give us kind of an idea of what's working. We all know inside of our portfolio, we have our rock stars and we have our dogs. So how can we replicate those rock stars out there and really get that? Is it due to operations? Is it due to brand? Is it you know, is the how location? You know, we want to look through all of that to make sure that when we're going out there to start finding those new sites, that we can kind of replicate the success that we've had in the past. Inside that review, we also want to look at, you know, fuel site sales. We want to look deep into the financials. We want to look at our assets. We want to look at everything inside the business, because anytime you're going through this, it's a good opportunity to kind of, you know, crack the hood open, look underneath, and see, is there something that we can do a little bit better across the board to make that next site an absolute banger for us. We want to visit. We want to start visiting potential sites out there, whether they're identified by employees, management, you're driving around. We want to assess the entire trade area. If we're looking, we always say kind of put an X mile radius around what you want to be or where you want to be out there, whether that's 5 miles, 10 miles, 50 miles. We want to kind of look at that X mile radius around and see what existing sites are out there. Can we put new sites out there? And we want to start really narrowing down, okay, look, these are the parts of the land that are available, and kind of identify those potentials so we can get into review from there. We also, in this phase one, this is where we want to start, if we don't already have one, start interviewing our commercial real estate brokers to make sure we have that right fit, because they're going to be the ones that really help drive the negotiations and really help you through this entire process. Phase two. Phase two is where we actually start establishing some of those potential sites out there. So we've gathered up our X mile radius. We know that we have a bunch of plot lands out there. This is where we can start going, okay, these are the top 3, top 4, top 5 that we really want to take and spend our time digging into, finding out if we can find any restrictions, any property access issues, any potential permit issues, land development issues. You know, we don't want to find a site that we absolutely love that has a 4-foot drop off, because, you know, how are we going to make the tanks, the piping, concrete, all those future decisions? We want to make sure that we kind of narrow and throw those things out here in phase 2 and kind of establishing some of those potential sites. We want to leverage vendors out there. IMST and Calibrates, they do great site surveys. They do traffic studies. They give you a really good estimate of what they believe the gallons are going to be, what they believe the potential foot traffic is going to be into the site, and what your inside sales could potentially be with that piece. This is a tool that we're going to have that's going to help in that final decision making. Inside the phase 2, as we start rolling towards the end of it, this is where we're going to start making some of those final cuts out there, and we really get down into our handful. We never say more than 5. We like to be in that 1 to 3 sites that we go, yep, these are the ones that we have been able to understand any restrictions, all the things we've done inside of phase 2, so we can start really honing in on those because we're about to go into negotiation. This is also where we need to finalize our real estate broker choice. And because, like I said before, this is the guy that's going to help us, the guy or gal that's going to help us all the way through this process to make sure that we get the site that we're looking for. So phase 3, negotiations. The part that I know everybody here on the phone loves, because this is where you get to be in that driver's seat and you get to go back and forth and try to get the best deal possible out there. So here's where we're going to make sure that we're negotiating the sales agreement, or if we're just going to go into a lease agreement of the final cut of those potential sites. This is where we're going to determine, are we purchasing this, or are we going to find a lease? Are we going to lease the property? Are we looking at any type of option deposits out there? We want to determine, any type of items that we need to gather that we haven't identified at this point prior to close, and we want to find that closing date and start getting those negotiations done and in place. So some of the tips that we have for some of the successful negotiations that we've seen out there in the market when helping companies out is we want to understand who does what part inside this negotiation. When is it best for that real estate broker to pop in? When is it best for myself or the owner or yourself to hop into the negotiation? Just understand who does what part and when the best interjection can happen. We don't want to lose our leveraging power inside of this. We always want to make sure that we consider any type of reoccurring costs associated with those individual sites. Different counties could have different things when it comes to power, water, sewer. Some of those additional costs need to be taken into consideration when you're selecting those sites. Always remember that the first offer is never going to be your best offer, and the sellers know that. So ensure that you're going in with enough wiggle room to actually get you into that comfort zone of where you want to be. Always make sure you review the contract terms. I'm sure I don't have to tell anybody that here. And never get more than you need. It may seem like a good deal to get the 2, 3, 4, individual parcel sites, or it may be one of those where we have 2 sites right next to each other. Oh, let me just grab that site right next, because we could do something. If it's not needed, if it's not inside the growth plans, you don't need to bring that into the deal, because things like that can really kind of slow the deal down. It can hurt the deal, and you can miss out on a potential opportunity for a good site. Benchmark, if you can, against other sites of similar size and amenities. This kind of helps inside those budget discussions to when you actually go and get the financing for this, if we can benchmark those individual deals. And as always, try to pull together the best performing you can, and that total cost of ownership that we talked about is taking into consideration some of those reoccurring costs, finance charges, and everything else. Phase 4. So phase 4 is really where the meat and potatoes happen here, right? Because we've done a lot of our pre-work, we've done a lot of our initial due diligence, but this is where we get that execution and that final due diligence, because once everything is signed up here, guess what? We own that property, and now we got to do something with it. So in this phase 4, this is where we're going to get all the items and requirements that we haven't been able to obtain before to get now. Permitting, topography report, availability of utilities. We want to start determining our entrance access into our site. Is it going to be a single? Is it going to be multiple? Do I need a wider side entry point because I'm going to put truck semi-fueling stations on the side or backside from there? All these things you need to start taking into consideration. Deed restrictions and any type of property surveys that we can find out there. So once we have those and we gather those up, this is where we can get kind of that final site analysis with the volume potential, going back to calibrate, saying that we've now identified more items inside this. Can you fine tune up that volume potential that you have out there? This is where we help build out a better performa and make sure that we really kind of fine tune that in, because we may need this as a financial instrument when we go out to find lending. Here is where we're also starting to get some of the construction and site cost estimates. We're working out there with general contractors, seeing what they're talking about, what their subcontractors, what they think is gonna take to get this. You know, one of the things that I'm sure some of you guys are feeling out there is, you know, when it comes to supplies, when it comes to construction materials, costs are going up on them right now. So getting some of those contracts done sooner rather than later and locking that in can really be something that can save you in the long run from there. You also want to, inside of here, get to that final cost and get all your agreements in place, because we're executing, and once we're executing, we're breaking ground and we're going from there. To continue on phase 4, we want to make sure that we are determining any type of our engineering needs. Similar to before in the construction, on the engineering, we want to make sure that we get those costing agreements in place. We want to get our blueprints, whether it's we're replicating a current store that we have inside of our portfolio, or we're going with a brand new design because we're looking for a new image inside of our re-imaging or rebranding efforts out there. We want to ensure that we got all of our civil engineering requirements and all of our permits prior to closing. And then we're going to move into our project financing if we need that. Make sure we get the right facilities. We're looking at multiple rates. You know, rates are really low right now on borrowing money. So always make sure that, you know, going out there, finding different banks, if you don't have an established banking relationship, to be able to look at those different rates for any type of financing you need. Want to hone in those terms. We want to check on those penalties, and then do any type of additional requirements around that project financing to get this site done. And then finally, in that phase 5, this is where the construction management happens and that ribbon cutting goes all the way through. Here's where we want to ensure that we're staying on top of our general contractor and their cost. We always recommend to set weekly meetings, if not bi-weekly meetings, to ensure that we're talking about budgets, we're talking about any project pitfalls. We can't just let the general contractor just move out there and do anything without check-in points all the way across. I always recommend this. You know, the general contractor always knows a guy that can do something, but always verify those subcontractors. You know, Google reviews are your friends. People do like to go out there and have conversations about individual contractors and subcontractors. So make sure you're verifying the subcontractor and the work that they're doing. Always reference back to the beginning of what were your goals, and are we meeting the goals now that we have the site selection, now that we were into that point of building the site and getting that construction in place. Are we there meeting that goal that we established way back in the discovery phase from there? And then finally, we always recommend about 60 days out. This is where we want to start getting our marketing out there, whether it's on social media or in town billboards, however we want to market this site to start driving people that direction. This is where we also start looking at hiring needs. Are we going to have to look outside for a store manager? Do we have a strong assistant store manager inside that we can promote? You know, this is where we want to get the hiring done, because we're going to have to get them trained up on not only, you know, the day-to-day operations, but also the technology that they'll be utilizing inside the store, cash operations, receiving inventory. You know, it's a good time to really kind of revamp and relook at those processes that you have out there to really hone those in inside these retraining efforts. And I'll, you know, try to see what type of promotions you can get out there for the day that your site goes live. You know, a lot of times you can call up your grocer, you can reach out to Monster, Red Bull. They're really all about, you know, kind of promoting their brand. So we've been really successful in getting kind of promotional giveaways when it comes to brand new sites out there. You know, we get asked a lot too on kind of what is that perfect project team. You know, there's no right answer, but if for us, the perfect project team that has made this very successful for us and for clients out there, and for those that have utilized kind of our 5-phase approach, is really having that executive sponsor. That's an internal team member high up that ensures that this is a go, this is what we're doing, and it's really kind of driving those efforts overarching everywhere inside of the company. You always want to set up a kind of a head project manager. This could be an internal or external team member. If you've got the bandwidth, internally to work through this, it's a great opportunity for somebody to learn or work through this entire process. But if you don't have the bandwidth, or you don't want to pull away your director of retail ops or vice president of ops, inside of this, you can always look for an external team member to kind of head up these projects. Obviously, the real estate broker, more times than not, is an external team member. It's not somebody that we have on staff, unless you're buying, a site a week, site a month, site a day. Then a lot of times we see a broker can be an internal team member. But we always say that if you don't have a need for an internal real estate broker, always try to look and see if you can find some type of real estate analyst. This could also be an external or internal team member, just depending on the bandwidth of your company at that time. And then obviously a construction manager, typically an external team member, and unless, like I said, you're building a site, every week, every day. From there, this construction manager is kind of on that project team, and these would be the people that are on those weekly meetings, bi-weekly meetings, working through this. We always say the subcontractor should report up to the construction manager. The construction manager should be managing those subcontractors. We don't recommend kind of getting in the way of that, because those are relationships there that stay a lot stronger from there. And that's really kind of how we go about it. It's how we have recommended out there to really lead your organic growth inside your company, and been quite successful. Some of the clients that we have helped out there prior to engaging and kind of working through our 5-phase approach, a site could take anywhere from 14 to 18 months. But with our kind of streamlined approach, it's been more of a 6 to 9 month project to be able to go from dirt to ribbon cutting. So I appreciate everybody on the line here today, and open up to any questions, or if I can make any clarifications.
Yeah, thank you, Dylan. A few questions. I mean, you did a good job laying out the 5-phase approach that you recommend. I'm curious, in your experience working with retailers, is there a specific phase or area, sub-phase that retailers often overlook or spend less time on than they should?
Yeah, it's definitely in the due diligence. That's why we find that a lot of times you know what you want to do. You find some pieces of land.
Dylan, you still there? Or did I cut out? Hello?
I think Dylan's having technical difficulties. Hey, Jed, you're still on. I think Dylan's having some technical difficulties.
Guys, are you still there on the phone? Did I get dropped?
Hey, Jed, are you there?
Yeah.
Yes, it's Todd. I think Dylan's having some technical difficulties.
Oh, no. Okay. I thought I got dropped there for a moment. So he was just getting into his questions, but we may have a trouble getting him back on the line, guys. So I'll ask him to share a couple questions with email thoughts to us, and I'll pass those out to everybody. But I did see a couple questions come in from the audience members. So sorry about that technical difficulties with Dylan there, but I really appreciate him giving us that 5-phase approach that they implement. And then Todd, you and James, appreciate your discussion about the cloud computing as well. And we'll get you the rebroadcast and the slides out to this. And hope you found some of the information in here valuable today, and you can take it home and make your companies better. Take care, everybody. Bye. Bye.
And just like that.